Hi, I'm Jonathan Ward.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Lang.
I'm Sonia Jante. Together, we're unlocking leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take the question from a real client and provide key insights to address their challenge from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to address challenges and opportunities. Let's get started. Our question today is from Nanette in Baltimore. I'm interviewing because I want to work for a good boss. A friend suggested that understanding the culture also matters. What do you think I should focus on? Kimberly, what should Nanette focus on?
Wonderful. Thank you for your question, Nanette. What should she focus on as far as being able to assess the culture of an organization? And so let's just assume that you've already made sure that the job requirements and the amount of people interaction, employee interaction, or client interaction is enough and aligned with your personal skills and needs. So let's look at the culture perspective. How can we ask the right questions in order to ensure that what the organization stands for in a culture, it is aligned with you? So initially, I always like to ask, how long was the person that was in the position you're interviewing for, and why did they leave? And is there an opportunity for you to be able to have a conversation with them? Great question. You're probably, 80% of the chance of the time they're going to say no, but it's a question worth asking because you'll get a lot of insight as far as, were they only in the position for a year? Why, if they left because of personal reasons or just disagreements with the leader or disagreements with other members of the team, that gives you some insight of possibly what the dynamic is. In addition to that, ask just really what the overall attrition rate of the organization is. That gives you some insight as far as, are people feeling it's just not a very thriving environment? Could it be possibly toxic? Additionally, if you can get any access to anybody else that you will be interacting with on a regular basis from a team, from a managerial perspective, it's important to have those offline conversations. And from there, you can just ask, what is John's management style? Do you feel like you have a lot of freedom and autonomy to make decisions? Do you often feel like you just can't get things pushed through? So it's really important to talk to others to understand what that culture is. Then while you're in the interview, I always like to ask questions such as, assuming you're talking to your manager or somebody who will be over you, just how do you encourage innovation in the company or out-of-box thinking and autonomy? How do you as a manager build community amongst our teams and create collaboration and open communication? I'd ask just from HR perspective, how often are 360s done for leadership, people in leadership positions so that you have an opportunity or that others are able to vent how they perceive this particular leader, and hopefully then they're therefore acting on those insights. And then just I think just being aware of what you need from a culture, what are your morals and values that you need? How much autonomy do you need? How much of an engagement from a culture do you need? How much of a bigger purpose do you need, such as they have a regular charity event that donations go to, something. So, ask personally for you, what is important to you from a culture, and then make sure you're asking the right questions when you're in those interviews or in the ability to be able to talk to other people in order to get those questions answered. So I'll start with that. And who'd like to give some more insight to Nanette?
Well, I'll throw a couple of my 2 cents in here with this. I think it's interesting when you talk about the quality of the boss that you want to work for. And I think in a lot of cases, the quality of the boss says something about the organization's culture to begin with. If there is a toxic boss in an organization, that says something about the culture of the organization, that they're not willing to confront bad behavior and to manage that person out or to develop them. But I also find it really fascinating to look at the distinction between what an organization says about itself on its website, and then when you talk to people about how things actually go there. I've worked for companies that have published policies and norms and saying, for example, we are process focused, we're steady, et cetera, et cetera. And then their annual awards go to the firefighter of the year, who was the person who was dealing with chaos most often. So there's a big disconnect between what they espouse and what they actually reward. So that's the kind of thing to look for. It's tough nowadays in the virtual environment. It used to be that when you walked into I notice this as a consultant or a coach, whenever I walk into an organization, I can tell a lot about a company just by seeing how I'm treated when I walk into the lobby. How does the receptionist treat me? Are people smiling as they walk around in the hallway and the organization? And that'll tell you a lot about what's going on there too. And as Kimberly advised, ask a lot of questions in the interview. You're as much focused on making sure this is the right place for you as it is with them making sure that you're the right person for that organization. When they ask you, how do you deal with heavy workload, you might ask them, what does heavy workload look like to you? Is the expectation 50 or 60 hours a week, or what? So there are ways of getting around that without saying how many hours of overtime I expected to work or something like that. But you get a feel for what the organization is. But again, asking questions is the surest way to find out. They need to sell you on, this is the place for you to come to. Yeah. Life is too short for you to work at a place that you don't feel like you fit in. Exactly. Sonia, how about you?
I'm glad that you took the same tack that I was going to take, which is when somebody starts with a question of, I want to work for a good boss, I ask myself, how do they define that? Right. Because their ability, clearly they've thought they've worked or have experience working for bosses that they did not feel they were good, and whether they were good for them or they were good for the organization. So I guess what I'd start with, Nanette, is I think you need to get clarity, and you need to define for yourself what constitutes a good boss for you. Once you understand that, then I think you'll have a little bit more knowledge to go into, as Kimberly suggested, into interviews and ask about, and be curious, be asking about whether it's about style, or it's about focus, or it's about development of their people. You clearly have your own criteria. And if that doesn't get met, even if you were like in that quote unquote happiest culture in the world, there might be things that you still think are missing. And when we're moving into a new role, it's a big jump, because we clearly have invested our time and energy in building whatever it is that you're doing at the company that you're at, and you want to make it be a good fit. So once you have identified, like, what is important to me in a good boss, then I agree with Kimberly and with Jonathan that understanding the culture has a lot to do with what are people experiencing every day. And somebody once shared with me that an interesting question that you can ask, and it doesn't seem as pointed, but it gets to a lot of answers, is to say, so what works here? Mm-hmm. And it's so funny, because sometimes people will say, well, it's squeaky wheel gets the grease, or, make sure that you're brown nosy, or whatever it is. So I think your ability to get clear on what is it that for you is important in a good boss, and then what does that mean in terms of the culture that you're going to be working in, so that you set yourself up for success. It's a tough thing to make a move, and the last thing you want to do is be thinking about wanting to move out of there as fast as possible. Because even though we have a lot of dynamic circumstances in this business environment, you want to build some kind of level of stability for yourself, to give yourself some safety, some work safety, some psychological safety. So that's where I was going with that. Any other thoughts that you guys have about this?
Well, you just made me think of a scenario. When I was marrying my second husband, he was a CEO of an organization. I should have looked at the way he treats his executive assistant, because that would have given huge clues about what our marriage would have was like and why it wasn't going to work for me, right? And I didn't, right? But just simple things like, just how do they treat the janitors? How do they treat, what's the attitude of the janitor or the person in the mailroom, right? So the people in the cafeteria, if you're on site, but just trying to look at those reporting relationships. And are you seeing people express themselves? Are you seeing people just kind of being yes people and, showing up but not really having much to say? That's hard to discern in the beginning, but if there's any way you can get some kind of visibility into that day to day and how people are interacting and how your superior or boss is interacting with other people, would be really, really insightful, I think, to really what you're looking for. And making sure what you're looking for is really important as a beginning step of this process, right? And can define that clearly so you can ask the right questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that self-knowledge is absolutely critical. And, I love the question too, what does success look like here? what does a successful employee look like? How, how do you, how will I know I'm doing a good job? And that it's great for getting out those expectations that may not be explicit in the job description.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I wanted to share a story about that I heard once, just as something that might trigger some ideas for Nanette. And that was, I was coaching somebody, and they were clearly not happy where they were, and they wanted to move somewhere else. And they had used that same term, I want to work for a good boss. And I said, so let's talk about the interview process and who hired you. And what we ended up finding out was that the person that hired her met all the criteria of what she really wanted in a boss, seemed to be very clear about how he would invest in her development and all of that. And then when she joined, he put her underneath somebody else. So automatically, that created a little bit of level of distrust for her. She started having to now engage with somebody that she had not interviewed with, had not known anything about, and found out that they knew that this leader was very charismatic and people felt really comfortable with him. So he was the primary person under which, and so I said, oh, it's like a bait and switch, huh?
Right, a lead magnet, right? Jeez.
Yeah, so something to think about. And so basically, when I said, did you at any point in time inquire, were there any changes in leadership or in the structure of the organization that were being planned for? And how would that affect you if you went into this role? I said, if at the very least, that might have been something that would have given you a clue, because even if he had hesitated in answering that, that would have given you your answer. But so sometimes it isn't, we think we're doing all the things right, we're measuring everything, and then circumstances change. And that's when you realize it's not what I thought I was it wasn't what I was buying into.
Yep. And then that's a question too, that I often asked, and I encourage my clients to ask too, is it's okay to ask them what their career aspirations are. And how long they've been a leader in this position, that, so that'll give you a clue too. If they've been there for 3 years and they want to eventually be, a C-suite person, they're probably short for that, managing you or you being on their team. So I think that's a fair question to ask as well. The second piece I wanted to bring out too, I was coaching a client the other day, and she was actually pretty high up in an organization, and she's trying to bring back some levity in the organization. And she actually works in healthcare, and obviously your healthcare workers at any role, physician, nurse, the front desk, have just been through so much and burned out. And this particular person had a really, really bubbly personality, but she wasn't showing up with work that way. And I just said, this is not a real name, but I said, hey, Barbara, do you believe that being a leader or being a hard worker requires you to be so stoic and head down, and that you can't laugh and you can't be you and you can't be fun and you can't have some levity? So if you, if you saw a leader as having a sense of humor and was kind of bubbly and just kind of joking at some point, do you perceive him being a poor leader and not doing his job well? And she's like, well, no. And I said, why don't you start bringing yourself to work? Because your employees are craving that too, right? And so my point in that is, also look internally, what amount of levity do you need, right? Do you prefer a very stoic, heads down, more independent and everybody's pushing for a target? Or do you also like a little fun in there, some levity? We're going through some really difficult times, and I think levity and humor are important. Doesn't mean you can't be effective. Doesn't mean you can't get your work done. So if that's important to you, I think it's really important to ask questions around that too. How many opportunities do you have time to get together with your team and have some fun? What do they do to help breed engagement and friendships and close relationships at work, which are so important for your happiness too. So I think that's a point that needs to be addressed in your culture piece as well.
Yeah. Well, and especially, I guess, thinking too, is that what do you come to work for a social environment, or are you somebody who likes to be in a quiet kind of situation too? So that's another advantage of knowing yourself well before you go into those interviews. So obviously, Nanette, there's a lot we could follow up with this, but thank you very much for your question today. And we hope that you and our viewers and our listeners have a better understanding of how to find a good boss and how to talk about the culture in an organization. So to our listeners, if you like the content we shared with you today, please like this episode and also share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unlocking Leadership-askthecoaches.com. We look forward to reading your reviews. You can also find Unlocking Leadership Ask the Coaches on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a leadership question or would like to reach out to our coaches, please email us at info@unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.